Uh, okay, so the schedule is kind of based off the people that I'm assuming students are here for the whole class, working the whole class. So I understand if you miss or you fall behind, but do your best to work outside of class if you did fall behind or you did miss some classes. I know some of you are working, outside of class, and that's great. Keep that up. Um, the assignment that's on our plate now, if we're following the schedule, is that Exxon building. And I just want to talk a little bit about moving on to the site. Right now, I'm hoping that if you've been here every time and you haven't, you've been working on the class, you'd be able to get it done by the start of class on Thursday, if you've got your building basically done. But if you haven't got there yet, you will get there. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a tutorial here on how you get the building on the site and what's the best way to deal with that. So if you look at SketchUp here, right now I've got my layers. These are called tags. And so I have my second floor. If you follow my videos on this assignment, I put the roof in the second floor and the third floor on a tag. I'm going to turn them on so we can see them. Because the reason I want them turned on is, let's just pretend this building is done. Now, I got to tell you, if your building looks like this one when you turn it in, it's probably not going to get an A in the class, because this doesn't look like a real building. But let's assume my building is done, my exterior design is done, and I want to now put it on the site and fit it in on the site. So first thing I'd probably get, I've got the site on a layer. So I've turned that site on a tag, I've turned that off so it doesn't confuse me. Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if something's not in a group or a component, it's really hard to grab all the lines and move it around, because when you grab something and you put it on another surface and then you move it around, it like grabs, it's like sticky. It grabs like the lines from the surface you put it on and moved it around. Have you ever noticed that happening? I'm seeing some nodded heads. So the way we avoid that when we place our buildings on the site is we make the building a component or a group. Now, it can be either. If it's a component, I could use it over and over again. And if I modified one, they'd modify the other. But a group is just a group together. It's like a component, but it's not called a component. It doesn't show up in the component thing, and you can't make multiple ones that all update. So what we want to do is make our building, once we got our building design done, into a group, so we can put it on the site and move it around by just clicking one thing and moving it, and it doesn't drag all the site with it. So I'm going to kind of walk through how to do that. So I make sure all these layers related to the building are on, and then I just highlight it, and I go in and I go make a group. So now it's one thing. Now I can still go ahead and edit the group and mess with my building, but it's like a component. It's one thing. Now, when I put it on the site, now I can just grab that one thing and move it around and rotate it. So let's just say, now this little L and this little yard is that little play yard for the existing daycare center and the daycare center. Since we're building this new Exxon building, we can edit that site and erase those lines and put this building anywhere on the site, put yard anywhere on the site. So if you want to do a bigger play area for the kids, so I can move it up and down, I can move it left and right, I can rotate it, and it's really easy, right? Imagine if I hadn't made it a group yet. This thing would be dragging stuff around on the site, and I'd be leaving things behind. So once we get our building placed where we want it, we can go in, and then if you'll notice, the site, that's also a group. So I can edit that group without, I could either, I can edit that group however I want, or I could edit the group with keeping the building on. So let's show you that. So right now I'm editing the site, but if I wanted to see where my building was, I would uncheck that box that says hide rest of model. So now let's imagine that we've got our building on our site. We've got our site. We've painted the materials on it where it's grass where we want grass. It's paving where we want paving. The next thing we're probably going to want to do is put like like cars in the parking lot. Put like little kids' playground toys in the play area. People walking around on the outside, because we're trying to come up with a nice picture to show to our client. We're going to go to the 3D warehouse, which is there, and watch my video on how to find things in the 3D warehouse. But let's just imagine we want to do a swing set for kids. So we can grab this and drop it into our model. I guess I got to agree to this here. So download. And now I can put a swing set in my little play area for my daycare center. Okay. So there's a video on that goes into more detail on like how to find good cars and how to find good people and trees and all that. So then the last part of the assignment is I asked for one scene. So we've got our building on our site. We've got our site figured out. And the reason I gave you this assignment is this is like what I did in the working world. Somebody would come up and say, hey, I need to know if this site's going to work. Can you mass up a building and give me a picture so I can show it to my clients and see if like the bank is going to want the drive-through works okay? Should they buy this lot? Because like I did preliminary studies, and that's what you use SketchUp for. You don't use SketchUp to do like the working drawings for the building, but you use it for conceptual studies. So then the last thing I asked for on the assignment is to have one scene that's like at least one that's a pretty picture that we're going to show to the owner. So in that case, if we want to have a pretty picture, what we're going to do is I'm going to close some of this stuff out here. First off, we want to get our camera to be perspective because that's how people see it. So we're going to make it a perspective, and we're going to make it like at eye level. So this is parallel projection. Now we're in perspective. Okay, so this is how your eye really sees it. So we're going to get down. Now you can see by getting down, I didn't drop my place on the parking lot. It's floating above the parking lot. Then the other thing we want to do is we want the scene kind of decide it memorizes all your settings. So I don't want to see the guides, so I'm going to say delete all guides. Okay. And then the last thing it does is it also has your shadow setting. So I can add shadows to make it look more realistic, and I can change the time of day. So I can make it however I want to do that. Say I want to show some shadows, what it's going to look like in the afternoon, make it realistic. I can change how high and low the sun is by changing the date. I can change how light and dark the shadows are. So there you see the lights getting darker. Here the shadows are getting lighter and darker. So this is where you kind of use your artistic abilities. So let's imagine now that we think this is the best scene that we want. Now, this isn't a great one, but we want to show the client. We're going to click on add scene, and it's going to memorize exactly what this looks like. So I click on the plus button, and I can rename it. So if I click there, I can click on edit, and I could call it test front view. And you can see it saves all these things, and I'm going to hit OK. So now if I get like way off wacky here, and I want to go back to that exact view that I think is the one that's really going to sell the client on my project, I click on test front view, and it takes me back there. I think the other thing I need to get rid of, I noticed that I want to turn my axis off so that I don't see them on this view if they happen to be visible. And I would just turn that off and hit update, and then it would update that. So it's going to update that style so that that axis is turned off. Now, if I really want to get funky, and this was for extra credit on the assignment, what I'm going to do is pretend I'm like walking up to the front door, and I'm going to make another scene. So let's add another scene here. And we'll just leave it at scene 2. So what you can do is if you have multiple scenes, so if I go back to my test front view and I go to scene 2 here. And what I can do now is run an animation of those, and that's up here. So if you hit play, first off, I'm going to set my animation settings. So I'm going to transition between one scene and another, and I'm not going to have a delay, and I'm going to make the transitions time like that. So I'm going to hit OK. So now let's go ahead and play our animation. So it starts at that first scene. And then what it's doing is it transitions into the second scene. And I've got it in a loop now, so it's going to go back and forth between the two of them. But if you can imagine, if I had like 20 of those scenes, I could literally like walk you around the building, or I could fly in from space and land in the parking lot and walk you. I could show you the aerial view and walk you around by which scenes I put in what order. Does that make sense? So that's extra credit that is not required. Having a scene is required. Having an animation is extra credit. So that's my little tutorial on the finishing steps of this project. So once you get your building, so all 4 sides look like something, and one side looks really good, put it on the site, put cars and people, playground equipment and trees. Give me one scene, and then you can do an animation if you want to for extra credit. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. I'm going to just stop around, talk to all of you today just to see what's up, if there's any questions or how you're going.